Apparently Ben Carson didn't want the Surgeon General.
I'm not sure what happened with Matt Gaetz.
I know, I was going to look.
Where the president can use presidential power, like power, part literally.
Robert, what I like start off with the topic number one, the pick. Jeanette.
I mean, so obviously there's a range of picks. Different people like or dislike them for different reasons. So you've got the sort of more Republican establishment choice and people like Rubio. You have for Secretary of State, which has a lot of power, particularly the State Department has a lot of power. Rubio is not the kind of guy that's going to shake anything up over there. That appeals to one wing, doesn't appeal to another. And it's been back and forth so that he's, Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Pete, the Hexorth, the Secretary of Defense recommendation is kind of between those two worlds. A guy with a lot of military experience, media experience, and so forth. But like most of the health people he picked, other than Surgeon General, looked pretty good by me. So that's why I wasn't rushing. I think the Surgeon General pick was a weak pick. I prefer the current Surgeon General of Florida to become the next Surgeon General in the United States. It's been the only one that's been competent and capable during the COVID era. And I think this reflects a part of Trump himself, but also a part of Trump world that it doesn't necessarily want to extend the questions about vaccines.
Apparently Ben Carson didn't want the Surgeon General. He put out a post that says he wouldn't take the position. Do you know any reason why he didn't pick Lopado, or if Lopado would have been game?
I assume he would be. I mean, he's currently in Florida, but I don't see why he wouldn't be interested in the U.S. Surgeon General position.
Am I overreacting about the pick? Does the U.S. Surgeon General?
I think it's. I mean, all these picks are being put out there now so that people can react to them. It makes sense that people react to them. It wouldn't make sense for people to not react to him, put it that way.
As for the argument that goes, trust Trump on his picks and don't second guess him.
Oh, I mean, I think they'll be a lot better because of other people that are in the room this time at every level. It's also a mixed bag of people. There's an establishment wing that's in that room. There's a Wall Street wing that's in that room. There's the Robert Kennedy wing that's in that room. There's the Tulsi Gabbard wing that's in that room. So there's multiple groups, you could say, within those represented within those folks in ways that are much, much improved over last time. No doubt about that compared to 2016. But I think people should stay alert and stay critical if certain people's names and ideas are floated and think it's a bad idea. Be very vocal because now's the time to be vocal. Okay, I'm not sure what happened with Matt Gaetz.
I know. I was going to look. I've been picking
something else must be afoot. Is all I'll conclude from now. Because that didn't seem like Gaetz. That didn't seem like Trump. The way that went down. So I think probably something else may be in the works down the road.
Well, so I will not disclose my sources, but I picked the brains of bigger brains, not just yours, quite publicly, and other people do say that that there might be something in that ethics report that was going to be released that he staved off by resigning or leaving.
Yeah, but like none of that. I mean, all that he knew was coming one way or the other. There's no way to run for Attorney General and not for them to rehash the prior smear campaign they did against him.
But was there not I thought there was a more recent ethics report that was going to be released, and apparently the thinking is that by accepting the role and leaving Congress, they wouldn't release it. But that doesn't sound particularly right because obviously they're going to leak it regardless.
Well, yeah, they'll leak it regardless anyway. In terms of the timing issue, it was solely that you could prohibit that particular report from being published while he's not a member of Congress directly from that committee, so-called ethics committee, which is just absurd. But, it's laughable at so many levels. It's parody times satire on steroids. The idea that, a Congress where people have made fabulously rich by their insider dealings, that to the degree that people can have Nancy Pelosi's stock trade as an open Twitter account. That's the world telling you, worried about whether this ethics rule or that ethics rule. It's all kind of bogus. But so I can't imagine any of that was why. So my assumption is something else was afoot, but we'll find out a year, 3 years from now. We'll see in time.
If I could hypothesize, the only really thing that could have been afoot is the three theories that people are floating is I was listening to Shannon Joy, who I think is scheduled to be on tomorrow, and her take on things, and she calls Matt Gaetz a degenerate. I don't judge people for the behavior that is not relevant to the position that they're applying for unless it's criminal or really, really over the top. But are there rumors that Matt Gaetz, he might not be involved in underage sex trafficking, but he's involved in behavior that might be unbecoming in a material sense of the position of the Attorney General?
All that is the smear campaign they ran against him to prohibit him from running for Attorney General in the state of Florida, but so that he couldn't use that to then run for governor of Florida. So, and anybody who takes that seriously is like taking somebody seriously who believes in Russiagate.
Okay, and that was my understanding as well, is that they only come out with these sexual impropriety allegations when you are going for a position that they don't want you to have. They did it to Matt Gaetz, but it was an old accusation. Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know about the sex, but they go for the Russian agent. And then Pete Hegseth. Did you follow you followed the news on Hegseth last week?
They were waiting to sort of hit him with that first hit piece that they've been sitting on with people that are connected to people who hate Fox. So because Fox signs off on any kind of settlement of any kind over the years, then if you have access to Fox's insurer, Fox's general counsel, Fox's corporate board, you know kind of where everybody's dirt is in conservative media. That should have been the bigger takeaway in part from the Bill O'Reilly so-called scandal, is how Fox was actually using that to their benefit and their profit. Might have been part of a broader pattern of other things if you dug in deeper, wider, longer to the Murdoch name and Roger Ailes himself. So there's a certain timing of anybody that's worked for Fox, the whatever's in their skeletons or in their closet, everybody in media knows, because the way in which that tends to operate, who gets that information shared with. It's an issue I have with excessive employer invasions of people's internal privacy rights. Either way, they knew this was coming, and it sounds like it's nothing from Megyn Kelly. And stuff like this is not going to get anywhere if that's their goal in terms of the court of public opinion. The question is, can they get 51 senators? That's the question.
Oh, Bill. So in our locals, it says Jimmy Dore has a video about Gaetz. Looks like a honeypot operation. I was thinking it's a honeypot operation with Hegseth, like a married woman who immediately shows regret and then files a police report. And then it comes up 7 years later at the most opportune time, despite the fact that the police never filed charges against Hegseth, nor did Biden's DOJ file charges against Gaetz, despite the fact that that investigation occurred under the most weaponized DOJ on the planet. Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, is she the one making these picks right now? She hires staff, but doesn't have anything to do with appointments, correct?
I mean, she has some role, no question about that. But the chief of staff can be as influential as they want to be. She'll be very influential as a chief of staff. Personally, I'm not a big fan of. I understand why he trusts her, because he's been around there for a year and a half. Kind of picked him over DeSantis, you might say, because she's a longtime Florida person, or at least last couple electoral cycles. Her husband was a Reagan guy going all the way back to the 80s. Sniffed around Washington and didn't give up the sniff. So it's that kind of conservative. She's very sharp behind the scenes at working rooms in that way. I think she is more of a negative than a positive for Trump.
I know that you mentioned, I do wonder if she has, she'll pick some and say, we got to give and take a little bit.
There'll be people who undermine right out of the gate, and there'll be people that she'll be ready to sub in for when she wants to take out somebody. I'm sure she wasn't probably on the Matt Gaetz bandwagon, for example, is my guess. But Bondi, she is connected to. That might benefit everybody because Bondi's solid. We'll see. It's just that she didn't really make a splash as Attorney General of Florida. You could have easily forgotten that she was the Attorney General of Florida. So my view is, if I can forget that you are the Attorney General, are you gonna be the person who's gonna really clean up the Justice Department? Probably not. They would probably be better off with is creating new committees when they get in there. Bondi's very competent at running a prosecutorial office, not at deconstructing a very corrupt bureaucratic operation. So don't try to make her do both. Let her run the operation of the Attorney General's office and create some, task forces looking at lawfare, looking at pardons, looking at areas where the president can use the presidential power, like the power of pardon, literally in that case, to educate people on the problems in the legal system and trying to reform and improve upon it. A task force is to look at institutional changes that need to maybe take place, at least at the 7th floor level. What happened in 2020 and before cannot happen all over again. I think maybe look at things like that. I think Bondi's very capable. It's just what people were wanting out of the Justice Department Attorney General role was to clean house. That's not what Bondi's going to do. They need to supplement what she's doing with some additional people to be able to keep his word to that and his own objectives. I mean, his objectives were aligned with much more with Matt Gaetz than some others. Chief of Staff capability, no questions whatsoever. She's been very skilled for a long time. In terms of trustworthiness, to be aligned with the more reform aspect of Trump, the more populist aspects of Trump. Oh no, been cashing in politics for too long for that to be her orientation.
And then the question I had was, so Marco Rubio we talked about last week, and I love what you said. If Trump wants to come in and make like some sort of radical, wild new peace deal, make amends with Cuba, the best person to do that would be Marco Rubio, despite some people thinking, and probably rightly so, that he's a bit of a war whore for the war in Russia. And so there might be some actual political, very good use of Marco Rubio to get things done that might otherwise not be feasible with another candidate. Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General. Well, I think
he's okay. I think he's one of Trump's defense lawyers.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. That's why there were people floating Todd Blanche for Attorney General, which they were surprised when they went with Pam Bondi over Paxton or RFK Jr. We like and you don't think RFK Jr. is going to have a problem getting confirmed now that
there's definitely that risk. There's definitely that risk.
Elise Stefanik, U.S. Ambassador, I think we both like her. Tom Homan, Bordazar, we love. Pete Hegseth, we love. So Merkowitz and the other three who apparently were responsible for Never Gates. What sort of, I saw, Mark Robert, America's Untold Stories, filled in when you, a couple weeks ago. He's like, you have to do something to let them know that this is not going to be politically palatable. Primaries, pressure campaigns, strongly worded letters. What ways are there to make, is Merkowitz just going to turn over to be a Democrat? She'll just change parties and then vote her out the next time there's an election?
Well, you mean Murkowski?
Murkowski, sorry, not Merkowitz.
Well, practically that's what she's been doing for a while now. So, she's figured out a way to carve out her own little niche and create their own little rules to help that promote her little niche. And that's the way she's been able to stay in power. She may be able to sustain that in that direction. Like people like Collins in Maine, that's normally a Democratic seat. So I never complain about those kind of places. It's more like you're stuck with Utah with another Romney-esque Republican again. You just get elected to the Senate in Utah, and your first reaction is to tell the newly elected president you're of your party. You're not going to give him his attorney general's pick. And that tells you some people that need to be smacked around. People that need to be smacked around in Washington are in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate. That's who needs to be smacked around in Washington. And how much Trump is going to be able to achieve that so that he can smack around all the other bums in Washington is the open question for the next 6 months.
And by smack around, Robert Barnes means political smack arounds.
Yes.
and
not really, metaphorically.
Michael Waltz, I think I remember people being up in arms, and I have no idea anything about Michael Waltz without doing a deep dive. But can I do a deep dive into your brain right now? And National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, good or bad?
I think he'd be good. He'd be fine.
Okay. Doug Burgum, I think we like. Interior Secretary.
Especially in where he's at. Yes.
I don't even know what that does. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. Sean Duffy, Transport. Let's get to the good ones that have been causing a stir. Linda McMahon. That is Ed McMahon's wife or daughter?
Yeah, wife.
Secretary of Education. I don't know her history. I know people are making fun of the fact that it's a WWE. I didn't know that she was Ed McMahon's wife when I made my joke about never doing the pile driver, even as a stunt with the WWE guys. Like, I kind of love her now. She did the pile driver. He didn't hit her head on the ground, but I'd never do that, even as a joke. Okay, what's her deal? Why her over anybody else?
Some of these people are long-term loyalists. Some are donors. Some are people that he trusts or like in that specific area or space. So the other thing that's happening is a lot of these people are dissident billionaires of one type or another. So that's kind of what Elon Musk is and what Vivek is, and to some degree what J.D. Vance is and what Peter Thiel is, and to some degree what Robert Kennedy in his own way. He's not super rich, but he's super well known. All of these people are people that had some degree of platform that they've decided to either leverage or sacrifice a specific area of governmental concern. And Trump sincerely wants to unleash them to do what they need to do. You have people behind the scenes that will be working with people like the chief of staff and others that are aligned with the establishment, that are aligned with the lobbyists, that will try to undermine anything that from getting ultimately done by mitigating who gets appointed personnel-wise and all the rest. That's what's happening behind the scenes. Most of the fighting is happening in-house, so to speak, not between the parties.
Robert, the chat is going nuts because it's Vince McMahon, not Ed McMahon.